Well, the record button has been hit. So I'd like to welcome everyone to my class today. I know a lot of you that are out there. I don't think I've met Seppi Siggy before. Nice to meet you, Seppi Siggy. And Tofa and Elisant and Brett and Kelly. It's good to see everyone here. So if someone, oh, Kelly, you got to mute. No? Who's muted? Someone coughed.
Sorry.
Who's my cougher? You know. So today what I'm going to go through is just some tips that I've picked up, plan and event I'm doing now, and things I've picked up over the years. One of the interesting things that happened to me recently is I got pegged to teach a software engineering class in which we bring together, have several students get together, and they have to design this very long, very large software project, and they have to define it. They have to design it to some requirements that we give them. And so I was forced to learn. I haven't done this myself. I was forced to learn myself some of the concepts of software development and things they do, and a lot of them are really applicable to what we do. And I've started incorporating some of those things into my event planning. So I'm going to share my screen here. I'm just going to share my whole desktop here. I think I've got my notifications turned off, so we aren't going to have to worry about people doing this. Can everybody see my screen here? Can someone give you a thumbs up there? If you can see my screen. Oh, maybe you can't. Yeah, share. Stop video. Am I showing my screen? I think I'm showing my screen.
Yes, you're sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good.
You may want to expand it though, so it's through your whole screen, so it's bigger.
I'm sorry, say again?
You might want to actually expand that so it's covering your entire desktop instead of just a portion of it.
It looks to me like it's covering my entire desktop.
Oh. Okay, well, we can see the lovely island in the background.
Okay. All right, well, if you can't see something, let me know, and we'll try to move it around, and maybe I'll redo the sharing on this. But let me try to let me start the presentation here. And so you should be looking at tools and tips, tools and techniques for planning SCA events by me. All right. So in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about my process of how I plan events and what I have to do. And again, some of the tools I'm going to be using, but I'm only just very basically going to touch on the Artemisian requirements for this. Artemisia has its own set of requirements, which Calendar Deputy has been working on. It's a pretty good package that they put together. It takes a lot of the confusion out of putting an event on. Whereas before you had to try to figure out all the things that you're doing. Now you can go to the Artemisia's website and go to the library and pull down a packet that's got a lot of stuff in there, including the new budget form that's out there, which I think is pretty awesome. So so the setup for this is you have an event, you want to put on an event. Okay, your group has got well, I'm in Côte d'Ivoire, we've got Pyres every year, and we've got the Feast of St. Pyres, and we've got Harvest War every year. And so, sometime right around maybe December or January or February, we start thinking about, well, we've got this event we got to put on in September. Maybe we ought to start doing something about it. And so you've got, your event is on the long range Kingdom calendar. You've had the calendar meeting, all this seneschals groups have gotten the calendar meeting, your calendar is established for the upcoming year. You don't have anything official submitted. You don't have an event steward. You don't have staff. You're about 6 to 12 months out. Okay, that's typically where an event will get picked up by someone. And then, if I can move, there you go. Okay. So first you need a little bit of discussion. I think that's where we start is get together with some people and try to figure out what you're going to need. Now, I have heard this true, and maybe some of you can confirm this for me, that some groups actually solicit bids from their membership for an event. So more than one person will get together and say, okay, I need an event staff, I need a site, I need a map, I need a budget, I'm going to use Sage Blurb, and they'll put everything together and they'll submit a bid to their local group. Is anyone familiar with that? Does anyone ever do that?
In Arnhold, we might not have the map and the event staff flushed out, but we do have to have the site preliminarily figured out, and the budget and a blurb for the Sage advice.
Yeah. And to bid within the barony.
Correct.
I think that's nuts. I think it's.
In the
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
in the kingdom of Avicall, yes, all of our baronies and some of our shires as well also do a bid process. So multiple bids might come in, and then if no one bids, then there is a bit of a scramble with their excellencies or their highnesses to try to find out how that's going to work.
But I think that's a really wasteful approach. And I know that you do that, and I don't mean to dump on anyone because people do it away and they get used to that. But I think it's too much myself. My recommendation is that we have a meeting, and if you're in a small group, like in our shire, we will sit down and we'll usually have at a populace meeting. We'll sit down, we'll have several people there, usually around 10 or 12 tops, and we'll have a roundtable discussion. We'll think about possible venues, and we'll decide amongst ourselves who we think would be good for an event steward. And sometimes the conversation will go like, well, who is the assistant to the event steward last time? And for Harvest War, we try to set it up so that we've got, someone helps the event steward one year and then they sort of move into it the next year. That doesn't always work out. Or who wants to do it, who's available to do this, and we'll have a nice discussion about who we're going to do this. And we usually come up with a basic idea what venues we're interested in, and who we would like to be the steward for the event. As a forming a consensus to do this. Now, I know that when you get a larger group, it's more and more difficult to do that. And I do like the bidding process, but I think it's too much. I think if you're asking for multiple people to go around looking for a site, that is a bridge too far. I think that you should try to channel what it is that you're working on. And so I would recommend having a leadership meeting, if you don't have a populace meeting, discussing possible venues and soliciting letters of intent for the event steward, and have the potential event steward say, well, here's what I've worked on before. Here are the events that I've done. Here are some ideas, some broad ideas that I have. Or, if they've never done an event, say, I've never done an event before, but I have people that can help me, and I've looked into this, and I think I'd like to try this. I think soliciting letters of intent is probably a better way of getting started with something like that, to figure out who your event steward is going to be.
So is this for events that are well defined?
I think most of these events are well defined. So
Ahead of time, so they're recurring events, like the same type of war, having merchants, like that's already been happened in the past.
I think it's really interesting that you would ask that question. In Artemisia, I think all of our events are like that. It just seems like every year, we pretty much take the calendar that we had from last year and redo it. And I got a little bit of a difficult time with that, but I live with that. So this question, the person asking the question, are you in a kingdom where you are likely to have new and interesting events every year?
We've seen a couple smaller events pop up on the calendar. Like, most of the events are kind of set in stone, but we do have at least one that basically changes year to year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think that the reality is that every group has so many events per year. I'm not going to say which ones or whatever. And we usually have recurring events, or we know that they're going to occur about a certain time, that it almost seems silly to wait until 4 months out before the event to actually really start thinking about it, because it's going to come up, what's happening. Why not already nail down some of that stuff?
Well, and what's interesting, Shannon, and you've gone through this process, is that typically the calendar meeting for the kingdom is done 1.5 to 2 years in advance. And so as a seneschal, when I would go to these meetings, then it would say, well, Côte du Ciel has got Harvest War, usually the second weekend in September. And the first thing I raise my hand says, we definitely want to have that where it is. And then we've got one other event that sort of fits into where all the other ones are. And so the easiest thing turns out to be just running the same calendar with a few modifications every year. That's been my experience.
And
And
there's always going to be a little wiggle depending upon what happens, but
yeah. And so it's really difficult to get a brand new event on there. Sometimes you get a weekend and you want to do something new with that weekend. I think it's an excellent idea. Just from a human psychology point of view, people like to have things that they understand. Like one of the benefits of having Harvest every year is everyone many people have an understanding, have an idea of what that Harvest War is, and so they're able to rely on that when they're deciding whether or not to come to an event. But I think the second component of that is people also like to have things that are a little different. You want to have that mix of something I know and love and something that's novel and interesting. And so trying to find a match between those is always difficult. That's why, at the point now where we as this is my opinion, is as members of the Kingdom of Artemisia populace, we all know the calendar so well that when a new event pops up on the calendar, then that's the whole novel thing. It's like, oh, there's a brand new event. What's that? Let's go see what that is.
I can say for Griffin's Lair, when I was Seneschal, I was trying to get it so, okay, we know that we have a quest event over Memorial Day weekend. What is the quest going to be this year? Or we know that we have, so what I've done is I've changed up a little bit of, we're going to call it this event, but whatever theme or whatever you want to throw in there is up to you.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea. I wish that it were easier to say, gosh, we'd like to try for our group to say we'd like to try an event in June, and that's there has to be a lot of planning to go into something like that, years in advance, for us to try to pull off an event at a different time of the year, because we got to move space around in the calendar to make that happen. And some other groups sort of have their weekends, and they want to make sure that it stays that way. And so,
but I think that really, if not that we hold an event in June, but you could approach another group and say, hey, you guys want to swap weekends? Or, I think there needs to be a willingness to be open and discuss things.
Yeah, I agree. Okay,
so I could definitely speak from the Outlands being a geographically large kingdom. We have we have two events on the same weekend on opposite ends of the kingdom, and that's not too much of an issue, but it's also El Paso and Wyoming are on vastly different sides of the world. They're not really going to conflict with each other, so we have more opportunities, whereas smaller kingdoms like Artemisia smaller, Aidenveld in particular. Aidenveld is a much smaller geographically.
Well, size, people-wise, but definitely not geographically wise.
Well, one of the interesting things about Artemisia is that we are a very large kingdom, but there are not too many population centers. I mean, most of the population is up and down the Wasatch Front, which is 100 miles up and down, and then we have Boise and the area of Idaho and Thousand Eyes and up in Twin Falls, Idaho Falls, and so you can have multiple events on a weekend, but that doesn't happen very much for us, does it? Come to think of it, we haven't really thought about that, but maybe something that we could expand into as we go through. Yeah. So let me go ahead and continue on. So however you've done it, whether you've submitted bids, had people submit bids, or you've picked one, the event steward's first goals really are going to be getting a venue and some staff. And I'm not going to talk too much about this other than to say that if you're looking for a venue, good luck. There are not a lot of good SCA venues out there. They're hard to find, and they're just incredibly valuable when you do. And it's for me, I have always, anytime I'm out traveling or driving around or something new happens, one of the first things that pops into my head is, can we use that for an SCA event? and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, we are really fortunate in Coatesville to have several really good venues, and we have a few in the kingdom. We have the castle downstairs down in Provo. We've got a couple of them up in Ogden Canyon. We've got the Uprising site, and went to Raptor War last year. That beautiful site down by Niagara Springs down there, really gorgeous. So finding and keeping these is really, really important to do. Always be willing to try new venues, see how it looks, see how it works, and be thinking about it. There's a few places I'd like to have an SCA event sometime. I'm just sort of waiting for a good opportunity to make that happen. And you're going to need a staff in order to make this happen. You go, oh, there you go. So you're going to need a staff. You're going to need, you're probably going to need a marshal, maybe a feast steward if you're going to have a feast. You're going to need a reeve. You may need an arts and sciences steward or a youth activity steward or a merchant steward. If you're looking around for staff, I think there's some places that you can look. You can mine the officer roster for your group. You know, you need to talk to your night marshal of the group immediately and find out from that person what the availability is for them for marshal, or if you did need a different marshal for the field. Try to working with the officers to make that happen. Look at the OP to find who your pelicans are and shame them into doing work for you. Be on the prowl for yellow belts. I like using proteges because they are usually hungrier than pelicans are, and have a nice backup that are sitting, you know, just in the backseat ready to say, oh, do this, do that. But sometimes it will take just a chance on someone who's never done anything like this before, and those kinds of people, you know, a rank newbie sometimes is going to do an excellent job. You just have to make sure you put them in a place where failure is a possibility, and you know that you're going to have backup for them if they need help. Okay, so a little. That's all I'm going to talk about for the venue and the staff. But here's some really interesting things that we use. So sort of setting the story up. You're going to need a bid. If it's a kingdom event, you're going to put together a bid. You may already have done this if you've had to work your way through the group. You're going to need a budget. You're going to need an event registration form. You're going to need a blurb for your newsletter. And here's a new one that I did not understand at all. I did not realize at all until I started doing planning for Harvest War this year. And that is a cancellation strategy. Never put one of those together before. Always had one in the back of my mind, you know, but I've never had to submit an actual strategy for cancellation. This is a requirement now for Artemisia. I've heard this. Is that true? Can anyone confirm that? You haven't seen it? I got a couple of heads.
It's a requirement.
I've never heard that before. I mean, we've
Not a
just
bad idea.
Yeah.
So it was a good exercise to go through. What do we do if we have to cancel this event? What are the dates that we have to you know, stop planning this event and start planning on getting our money back if we do that? But what we use for this is this is our secret weapon number one. It's the Shire Event Archive, and I'm actually gonna show you the Shire Event Archive. Like here it is. Can everybody see my screen here? This thing. Okay. So this is something that we've built in CodeUCL over a number of years. We started, I think, back in 2014 doing this. It's a Google Drive. It's a shared Google Drive. We have the Seneschal as the administrator for the drive. We have several other people there. So if we lose a person, we still got administrative control over it. And every time we have an event, we take the paperwork for that event and we put it into the Shire Event Archive. So as an example, we did coronation or spring here. Let's do Spring Crown 2019. So last year we ran a Spring Crown, and we built a bid for it. We have here's our pre-event budget. Here's the bid form. Here's our Sage blurb. Here's the what else do we need? We need an event registration form. Where's the event registration? I don't see the event registration form here. Which should be there. But we take all of these documents, and we're really fastidious about this, taking them and putting them into the archive. So next time we run an event that's like this, the person that we're putting in charge of this has all this information at their disposal. So we've got the Spring Crown. That was sort of a one-off event. Here's our Harvest War archive. And we've got this thing laid out for several years in advance. And here you can see the 2020 Harvest War information is being put in here now. And it's a way that everybody could share the information that's there. And we build this institutional knowledge year after year for what we're working on. And it's particularly helpful, I found, whenever we're putting together like a kingdom bid. Let me go back to the Spring Crown. So here's when we're putting together a bid, we'll use Google Docs again to do this, to create a bid for ourselves. That allows several people to work on this at the same time, allow them to work collaboratively rather than trying to have to share things back and forth. We have a format that we'll use for this, so we'll put the information together for it. Here's some driving times and some food and feast and lodging, and some justification for the budget, and some area hotels and things like that. So every time we put together a kingdom bid, we'll pull one of these forms from one of our old archives, build a new directory, plop it in there, and then start modifying things that we've done before, rather than trying to have to build them up and develop them all over again from scratch. Really an effective tool for us. And here's while I'm here, here's something else we do quite a bit when we're doing event planning. Well, actually, I'll say that till later. I'll come back to that. That's really good. Talk about maps and things. So Shire Event Archive has been a really incredible thing for us to deal with, or a really helpful thing for us to have. Let me see, where is my, here we go. Okay, all right. Okay, oh, that's us. We took a tour. Okay, so when we use that Shire Event Archive to put together, I should talk about this a little more. We put together all of those pieces of paperwork that we need. And there's something else I'm gonna rail on for event planning. This is a pet peeve of mine, which I feel we have to work on this, but other people feel that we're doing it great. And I think that we are way ahead of ourselves in putting together the paperwork for events. So if you're putting on an event in Artemisia, the sage wants to run this. Was it 3 months in advance? And
yeah, basically need to get it to them 4 months ahead of the event.
It's required to have the event in the Sage for 2 months.
Required to have it in the Sage for 2 months. And if you're because the Sage comes out half a month before the beginning of the month, you could, and if you have an event that happens, at the end of the month, you could easily extend that to 3 months or 4 months. And so it really surprised me the amount of time in advance we have to get things moving to get something for the Sage blurb. But my question is, do we really need to get it that far in advance for the Sage? I mean, it just seems like we're trying to notify people well in advance. But I could easily, for Harvest War, we've got this nailed down. But for some of our smaller events, I've been put in a situation where we couldn't secure the site by the time that the event registration form and the Sage blurb were required, because the venue doesn't plan things that far in advance. So sometimes I almost feel as though I'm really rolling the dice on these things.
I found that it seems like the Sage information is like this brief outline, and everything else comes from websites or event write-ups on Facebook. So the Sage is like a placeholder that just tells you that this group's having an event.
Well,
I agree with that.
I have a comment. This deadline comes from the print that used to exist, and it has not been updated due to the modern tools that are available. things were, when it had to be printed and mailed, this time frame was set and it hasn't been updated, and that's society-wide.
Yeah.
I would ask that, like, in your kingdom, the one you're speaking of, does pretty much every event, everyone goes to all the events? They don't kind of like pick and choose which events they go to? Because I can totally see that if I only am able to attend, say, 4 events a year, I want to know which ones I'm going to attend, and I want to know well in advance if they're going to conflict with anything else in my mundane life. So I know for planning events in the mundane world, if I want to do anything during wedding season, which is essentially like a 4 to 6 month season, I have to book my venues at least 6 to 8 months in advance. So like where I live.
So no, people don't attend every event here. They do have to pick and choose. But the calendar is set conceivably a year in advance, so you know what dates events are going to be happening on for what groups they're from.
But the details wouldn't be, right? So if I only attend events, if I only attend events where arts and sciences are a priority, I would need to know that well in advance, because if it's a event where like arts and sciences is like just a display, well, I'm probably not going to go to, I'm not going to prioritize that event. So I can totally see in places where people don't attend like absolutely every single event, that having stuff like that well in advance could be very, very useful for those kinds of people.
But see, our kingdom level events are definitely designated that it, like our kingdom ANS is designated. And a lot of the baronies have set events where their ANS happens. And so even if you don't get all of the details, usually that is mentioned in a blurb early on.
Well, the problem is, and these are excellent comments. The difficulty is that because we are requesting some of this information so far in advance, the details aren't actually set, and so we get placeholders, as Shannon mentioned, we get placeholders in the Sage, and people are less likely to read it because the information is less trustworthy than you're going to find in other venues. So trying to come up, go ahead, Shannon.
I'm totally guilty of that. I almost never read my Sage.
Yeah, it's really, so I think it's worth having a discussion to say to at some point sooner than later, to say, if we were coming up with the SCA today, then how would we plan the way that we let people know events are going to happen? And I think it will be different than what we're doing now. I think getting information out there early is important. I think timely information is also important. And we seem to be living the old way, or requiring the old way, but living a new way. And so I think trying to come up with a new way of getting that information out is probably a worthwhile discussion to have. I don't know what the answer is. But
I have a question about that from Out of Kingdom.
Yeah.
Ontier has an online event calendar, and basically everyone goes and looks at that to figure out whether they're going to a given event. It says, like, this has thrown weapons, this has arts and sciences, and basically no one looks at the crier. Does Artemisia not have like, the crier is just like backup in case you have 15 minutes to kill, but basically no one uses it to determine what events they're going to.
That sounds very similar. We have a Kingdom event calendar. Many events have a link on that calendar. We used to have a lot of websites. Now we just have a lot of Facebook pages that are the most up-to-date information. Go ahead, Sarah.
The only problem with our calendar, at least the main one that I end up going to, it does not have an event on there if it doesn't have the official paperwork in there. So there are times when I've gone to look at the date or the information of where a crown or a coronation could possibly be, and it's not even on the list, even though it's only 4 months out.
The last part got cut off there. Your last part of your sentence got cut off for me.
I've gone on our calendar before to look for the dates of a crown or a coronation, and it's only a couple of months out. But because the official paperwork isn't in, it's not on the calendar.
Or it'll be wrong information. Like one of the coronations in Arnhold it was a different site.
But we're also living in a day in which, I'm like this past March, I was sitting at Gulf Wars and just listened. I just heard a news conference from the Mississippi Department of Health, and I went up to talk to the event stewards, and we sat around. We had a discussion, and they asked me what I thought, and at that point, before then it was like, hey, we're going to have this event, but as soon as we all heard that, it was like, nah, we can't really have this event. So they sat down and they said, okay, let's cancel the event. And this is the day before the event was supposed to start. And sat down, had a little meeting, and said we're going to put out something in 15 minutes. And 8 minutes later, I got 3 different messages from people across the entire U.S. that had already heard what the decision was. It was amazing to me. I was there when they made the decision, and I was there when people started coming in from all across the nation. News travels like wildfire in the SCA. So I really think that if in the worst case, you could plan an event and let people know it was the next day, and everyone in the kingdom would at least know about it, maybe not have planned to be there, but at least know that it was happening. So I'm sorry, that's a soapbox off there. So I forgot, I sort of lost my place. Event steward, ideas. I think we made it through this slide. So I guess here's another thing that has turned out to be really useful for us. And that is we've worked hard on Harvestware this year for electronic signatures. Almost, I think we have finally reached the point where electronic signatures are a realistic thing for us. And so when in our kingdom, your event registration form has to be signed by the event steward, the seneschal. The budget has to be signed by the entire financial committee. We did this planning during the height of the lockdown, but we were still able to get signatures on all the forms and get everything sent around electronically. A real boon to be able to do it that way.
How did you work that out?
How did we work that out? We have the documents up on Google Drive, and actually I think we used messaging for this. So we had sent to one person, and then they used Stylus and put a signature on it. And then we did another person. We did not use like Acrobat Signature or DocuSign. I think those are probably the next steps that we're going to have to go to for verifying signatures.
That's a good idea.
So take a tour. Okay, so you got your paperwork in, but now you really need to do some event planning. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to go back to our Facebook page. And this is what I did for Harvestware this year, is I asked for people to see who wanted to help plan Harvestware, who wanted to be a part of this. And I had a lot of people respond to this, which was really interesting. A lot of people wanted to do planning, and you can see that we've got a couple of responses here where people are volunteering to do specific things. That's great. And some people just want to volunteer, so I'll help out wherever I can help out. Put this on our group page, and then as I gathered names from that, and at first I put them all into their own Facebook planning group, which is something that we do quite a bit. But I'm having more and more trouble. For small events, a Facebook group just for the people that are planning the event is a reasonable thing to do. But the difficulty with using a Facebook group is all the messages start getting really confused. Like what's the message topic for, where do we talk about this and where do we talk about that? So we're doing something now. This is the first time we've tried this, and it's working pretty well. There are a number of tools out there that are specifically designed to get teams of people working together. And Trello is one of them. If you get a chance to use Trello, that's awesome. Probably the most accepted and available right now is Slack. I would highly recommend Slack. And here's in fact, can I get Slack going here? Let's see if we can. See if I can. We're gonna have to launch this. Oh, I don't need to launch this. I could do it right down here. Let's see if I can find Slack. There you go. So there's a web interface for this. It goes on all of your phones. Let me hear you be quiet there for a second. Goes on all of our phones, goes on iPads, goes on pretty much everything you've got. And the nice thing about using Slack is that you can have different workspaces. So here's our Coach which is unused. Here's a HBC boot camp, and I get to be Dan Watson in that boot camp. Here's our Harvest War workspace, and I get to be someone completely different. Do I get people here? People here. For this, here are all the people in our Harvest War workspace, and I get to be a different person on Harvest War. So you can manage your identity pretty well. And then within the workspace, you can create a thread for all the things that you need to work on. We've got a thread here for all the youth activities. We've got a thread for classes, which isn't doing much right now. We had an idea for a bazaar, kind of a yard sale out at the event. All of our martial activities, what was going for the Porta-Johns, and we're able to put all of these things in their own separate little bin and have people create them as needed and get rid of them as needed. I even have one for specifically for Bart, I need you to go do something for me. Slack is a little difficult to get people to buy into if they're not used to it. I think that's the hardest part, is to get people onto it. But it seems to be working pretty well. We're getting more and more participation, especially among the planning. The Slack is going to be really useful both in terms of planning and during the actual event itself. We used to use radios to try to keep in touch with everyone, but I think Slack is going to work a lot better. Everyone almost always carries their phone with them, and it's pretty easy to flip that open, see that Slack is calling you or is bugging you, and take a look, and you can find exactly what the topic is that you need to be working with. So I would definitely recommend that you pick up Slack. Is that where? There we go. That's back in. Okay. Sure. Archive tools and tips. Okay. So I used Facebook, try to find all the people that I was interested in working with, and now for Harvest War, you don't really want to, even though we run this war every year, we like to think about what we're going to do, what elements we want in, what elements we want out. And first thing that I want to do is I want to do some sort of requirements definition. What is it that we want to have at the war? And so we started a brainstorming session. And I think I've got, yeah. Here we actually did this on Facebook before we started using Slack. And for a brainstorming session, there's a couple of rules for brainstorming. One of them is that you want to encourage people to give you wild and crazy ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea in brainstorming. Your goal for brainstorming is to gather as many ideas as possible. So we'll throw it out there. What are ideas for activities? And a lot of them pop up. Here we see heavy fighting and rapier and merchanting, all those things forever. And some came up with barmaid races. We didn't call them that anymore. Don't call them that anymore. But what are all the things that we could have? That's where we got the idea for the bazaar or a chili cook-off, or there's all these different ideas that are out there. And so you take all of your ideas, and I want you to put them all together into a form. And for this, we actually used a Google Drive. Here's our schedule here. And I'm showing you too much of it. There you go. So we used our Google Drive for that, and used a Google form, which is their version. No, it's not form. It's a sheet, Google Sheets, which is their version of Excel. And we took all of our ideas and we put them all in a list. You can see them here in gold. And then we did something else with them. The next thing we did with them, we just put them in. We didn't think about whether or not we wanted them or not. The next thing we do is you categorize your different ideas. And for this, we use the Moscow approach. And Moscow is just categorizing everything that you want to think about into one of 4 categories of the must, should, could, and won't. Must are things that must happen in order for the event to be an event. So Shire trailer, got to be up there. Someone's got to move the Shire trailer up there. Should things are things that are nice to have that you're really interested in. could is are things that, well, if we got time and we have enough ambition and we have enough people and resources and we can do those things, chances are you're probably not going to do the good things, to be honest. But put them in there, you know. If you end up with the resources, you could bring back up to should. And then you categorize some things you just won't do. All right, that was an interesting idea, but we can't make it work out. So I went through that sheet and took all of the ideas, and it looks a little small here. There it is. Looks so small, but took that and we just categorized each one of those in terms of M for must, S for should, social media. We should be doing social media. We could do a gate book. We haven't decided to do the gate book yet. We should get hay bales. We must do porta-johns. All those things get put in like that. Okay, and then after you do that, you can take, and because you're doing this in the event archive and people have access to this, it's a shared document, so people can, you allow people to edit and modify, think about what they're doing. Okay. And then you're going to do a little assignment. So just because a person thinks of an idea, this is a real problem I have with events. Just because a person thinks of an idea doesn't mean they automatically should be in charge of that idea.
BJ's R&R. What?
Richard,
So
can
much
you
for
mute?
BJ's R&R. He
Richard,
spent the whole episode
Richard.
doing surgery. You know,
Ellen,
I'm
can
just
you mute Richard for
been
me?
trying to talk to you. Me here? Yeah, Benjamin Franklin Pierce. They call him BJ. No, that's Honeycutt. Never mind.
You might need to mute.
Kelly, can you? Perfect, thank you. All right, so a pet peeve of mine is just because a person has thought of an idea, you don't necessarily make that person in charge of the idea. If you do that, then very quickly people are going to stop giving you ideas, and so after we get an idea that we hear the things that we want to do, then I went back to the Shire web Facebook page and said, here's some things that are unadopted. Here's some tasks we have that we could do, but we don't have anybody to take care of them. Are there anybody that's interested in working on this or putting things up? And we started to get some responses back from that. And within a period of a couple of days, I had a ton of ideas and a ton of people that were all assigned to working on these different ideas. Just fantastic. And then the last thing that you want to do, so we put these things back in here, we put who's in charge of it. And again, these may not be the people that are actually doing the work. These are people that are going to be in charge of finding out who's going to get things going, who's they're organizing. Sometimes I call them the honcho. We're the honchos. And then we turn back around, and this is another idea from software development, is you want to try to schedule these out. Now, this is not a this is sort of turned into a little bit of a Gantt chart. So I took a number of time periods to figure out when things were happening or when they needed to be worked on. And you can see here that I've got 12 months prior, 4 to 6 months prior, pre-event, and then it turns right into the schedule for the event itself in terms of when things are going to happen. And then we could sort things based on when their start date was going to be. So I can see immediately that the next things on my list I need to be working on are site tokens, and Ideala is going to do site tokens for us. And Aslak, who's here with us today, Aslak is going to start working on social media. These are things that we need to start thinking about early on as we're working our way through the schedule. And then as we accomplish some of these things, I'll turn their color from black to red, sort of my way of keeping track of what are the things that are done and things that are left undone. I would highly recommend an approach like this, either to have a Gantt chart, actual Gantt chart that talks how long we think things are going to happen and when they're going to start, when they're end, or you can sort of build your own semi-Gantt chart by putting the time sequences and time periods and then filling information out through those. Okay, then what else do we have? Okay, so there's a little bit of wrap up. I got a little bit of extra time. I want to show you a couple of other things if I can. Maybe not entire event planning, but other planning tools I'm using associated with the SCA. Would that be acceptable to you guys? A couple nods? Okay. So
Please do.
Here's a couple of other tricks I use. One is here's how I plan encampments, if I can get an idea. The tool that I use for planning camps is PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint for a lot of stuff. It's easy to, I've got a copy of PowerPoint, it's not very expensive. And so I will take and I will put people's information. I like PowerPoint because it's got good drawing routines. I can, here's Kelvin's tent, by the way. I can move things around. I can grab tents and rotate them easily, move around. I can set exact sizes by, I need the format shape. Use the format shape tool. I know that Kelvin's tent here is, I use a scaling, and my scaling is 1 inch equals 10 feet. So I can see that this round tent for Kelvin is 14 feet by 14 feet. And so people will give me their tent dimensions. Here's Holy's tent is 16 by 16. Ray's got a tent that's 10 foot by 10 foot. And this is our encampment for Gulf Wars. And so I've worked on this map for several years, worked on a little bit for several years, and I know exactly where everything is on that site. It turns out to be an incredibly useful tool. So if you've volunteered to do encampment planning for like a large war, then I would, PowerPoint is a really great tool for figuring out where things are. Use PowerPoint for a lot of stuff. And then another tool that I want to show you, this is from the same event. This is our sign-up sheet for that camp. And we've done some interesting things. I hid the contact information, but we will look at the information that we need for this, name, whether pre-registration, what their arrival and end dates are. We put some flight information. I asked for their tent plan. So here, for example, here's where's Holy's probably hiding it. Oh, here's Kelvin. Kelvin is, I guess we didn't write that down here. I know what that one is. So Bryce McLaren's got a 12 by 16 Roman wedge. Raymond Richards got a 10 by 10 with ropes. Okay, I know where all that information is. And then we do almost exactly the same thing. This is the meal count. We want to know who is there for what meals. And so I have people actually tell me, all right, I'm going to be there, like this person, Bryce McLaren, is going to be there for Sunday supper, and they're going to be there through Sunday breakfast. And every time someone makes an entry here, like if for some reason they're bringing, their entire church along with them, then what that also does is that updates the overall count up top, so that the people that are in charge or working on specific meals will have an idea of what the head count is going to be for that specific meal. Since we started doing that, it's much easier to plan. I know exactly, well, I have a ballpark for how many people are going to be attending each meal at a war. And there's something else I just have to show you on this. Here's the meal planner where people are signing up to provide meals. This is my favorite sheet that I have ever created. This is I volunteered this past year to prepare breakfast on Tuesday morning breakfast. And I don't live in the area, so I can't do a lot of shopping, but I do have a Sam's Club account, so I know it's on Sam's Club. So what I have done is I've taken this number here, the Tuesday breakfast meal, and that gets fed into this sheet here. And then it goes through and it calculates, I figure out how much I'm going to feed each person. Like each person gets 2.5 eggs, 2.5 ounces of orange juice, 2.5 sausage patties. It's the South, trust me. And then it gives me an overall amount to get. It tells me how many units there are per containers, tells me how many containers to get, finds the floor of that, and tells me what I have to buy. So this thing, as people will sign up for meals, this automatically updates to tell me that I need to buy 3 36-count packs of eggs, 1 52-ounce bottle of OJ, 2-pack of OJ, 4 24-count boxes of sausage patties. I've got the product details here, and I go down through the list, and I order them through Sam's Club, and I stop on the way to war, and all the shopping has already been done for me, specific to that meal. It's awesome. It
You're
is great.
too damn organized.
I don't, and because I'm going to do this next year, I don't have to touch it. I just have to look at this, a day before the war and say, oh, I got to order all those things from Sam's Club. It is awesome.
Can you ever think about like transferring your teaching down to Weber State and move over here?
So these, I love Google because everyone, you can decide how much information to share among people. You can let people edit their own information, so you don't have to grab it, and it just makes the whole process much easier to get through it. All right, so just to wrap up, some tools to remember. Facebook, everyone uses Facebook. Don't have to remember that. Google Drive, can't say enough about that for event archives or shared documents. I would recommend Slack. I don't think we're using it very much now, but I think it's going to be, for anything complicated, I'm definitely going to be using Slack. And then for requirements, trying to deal with brainstorming and categorization, assignment, and scheduling. These are all really interesting and important things. That is it. We got a little time for questions if anybody wants to ask a question.
We have 4 minutes left.
Will you adopt us?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll take you guys.
No.
We'll take the whole barrier. You can be Côte du Ciel South.
Works for me.
I was going to say, isn't everybody trying to steal Côte du Ciel? So now Côte du Ciel is going to start adopting the bigger.
That's because everybody awesome comes from Côte du Ciel.
I agree with that, but that's my opinion, I suppose.
Because once a Côte du Cielian, always a Côte du Cielian.
A lot of awesome
I'm
people.
in 1,000 eyes and have been since I started to get to you.
I've really tried to get a lot of this started in Griffin's Lair, and we're slowly getting there. It just takes some more dedication to actually maintain these lists and get it put together.
The place to start is an event archive.
Right, and we've done that.
Absolutely.
Just so people know, as a nonprofit organization, you can get the entire Google suite from Google for free.
I didn't know that.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Or
Just
for
learned
your
something.
individual group
Huh?
or kingdom.
Never mind, I'll talk to you later.
So yeah, you can get access to all of this and storage space and emails for your group for nothing.
Yeah.
I got a quick question on that Moscow / planning spreadsheet. Would you be able to make a copy of that first tab available, sanitized for distribution, just to put in our archive?
This one that you're looking at now?
Correct.
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, Han chose it.
Are you like referring instead of the handouts that you could have followed along with? Or because I saw that you had it as a handout, this slideshow, which thank you, by the way, because I have a terrible memory, and so having handouts is wonderful for me.
If someone can remind me of this, just send me a little note in Facebook, Bartholomew Hightower. Then I'll grab a copy of this and I'll make a shareable link for it.
How have cancellations affected your group or different groups right now with everything going on?
So we've got a big war coming up in September. Right now, we've taken a look at what the cancellation dates are. We have a cancellation date for the site itself, and we have a cancellation date for the porta potties. Those are our biggest expenses, and so I think just understanding what it is and not getting too far along, and understanding how much money you're going to lose by a certain point is going to be important. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, and are there? I think Kellen has mentioned it to me before. Are there guidelines in place at the kingdom level for determining whether like baronial or shire events need to get canceled?
I haven't heard them. Does anyone else have an answer to that?
I do.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Well, actually, you're here, so you can tell them.
Yes, I am here. Seeing as how this isn't something that we've dealt with extensively before, the decision that we have made currently is that we will allow the groups to make their own decisions, but they have to abide by their current CDC and local area health regulations.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know if it was kingdom-wide, looking at like different states, because we're at different spots, even just Utah to Idaho.
Yeah, we are doing that actually. It's what now, if correct me if I'm wrong, and the last I heard was that the kingdom will not be doing, we're not going to be doing any kingdom events until all 4 states are able to travel and they have the same level of participation.
Yeah.
I know that
Well,
Utah,
everyone, I hate to cut the conversation off, but we are out of time.
Okay.
We want to make sure that people have enough time to get to the next classes. Thank you very much for being great, great audience and asking fantastic questions. I hope you found some of this useful, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks,
And
Bart.
thank you for teaching.
Recorded,
Thank
so
you.
if you want to go back and look at it, there is a recording of this session.
Thank you.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye. I'm ending it now.